Hello, it's Dr. H here with a very special guest. Anna Kurape is here with us. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. So Dr. Anna Kurape is here, and Anna is an integrative psychiatrist and therapist who guides her patients to harness their intuitive knowing to bring them closer to the life they imagine. She provides whole person care, tailoring treatments to each individual to help support their emotional well-being and promote long-term health. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kurapey.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh my gosh, and so am I. So for those of you listening, Dr. Kurapey and I connected a couple of weeks ago, and we were instantly on the same page and just gabbing away. And so this was just like a very natural evolution of that first conversation. And so before we dive into the topic at hand of weight and trauma, we want to just kind of handle the disclaimer legal stuff. And so just as a reminder, this presentation does not constitute medical advice. It is intended for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Do not ignore professional medical advice or seeking treatment because of information contained in this conversation. If you think you may be having a medical emergency, of course, please call your doctor or dial 911. So now we can get on to the good stuff. And, to start with, Dr. Kurapey, right, the conversation of weight and trauma, I would love to hear a little bit from you about how you see the connection between weight struggles and trauma. How are these two connected?
Absolutely. And I'm excited about this topic. I think so many of us deal with these issues, so it's important to talk about. I want to start with talking about the differences in trauma, because sometimes we can identify it as one thing and not another. And I just want to go through a quick definition there. So in the therapy world, we talk about big T trauma and then little t trauma. And so big T trauma is probably what we can all think of, like a big injury, natural disaster, or maybe some kind of abuse or neglect that we've gone through. Now, little t trauma may not be something that we really look at as trauma at face value, but it will affect our nervous system the same way. So that might be being in a toxic work environment. That might be being surrounded by unloved relationships. Maybe that's financial stressors. And so again, both of these things are going to affect our nervous system. So when we experience a trauma, what happens is our nervous system reacts in that fight, flight, or freeze pathway. It's a safety mechanism. It's actually a really great safety mechanism. It protects us. But what happens is after the trauma, if we don't process those emotions or those feelings in our bodies, that nervous system actually might become overactivated, and we might start responding to things that are not traumatic necessarily, but our body feels like they might be. So an example of that might be someone closes the door, we hear that loud boom, and we jump, right? That's not something that's traumatic, but that loud noise gives us that startle response. Or we're walking down the street and someone's walking towards us, and maybe we walk across the street to avoid it, or maybe we just become very hypervigilant as we walk by that person. Now, that might not be a dangerous situation, but again, our nervous system is becoming overactive. So when we feel those ways, what we do as humans is we find comfort in whatever that coping skill might be. So this is where food comes in. Food is a huge comfort for many of us for many different reasons. And we can see this in different ways. And I think we'll talk about both. But the first is that we can see that people begin to overindulge, or what people may refer to as emotional eating for comfort. And then the other end of this is that people may start to control their eating to find some kind of control in their life after such a traumatic event. And I can go into both of those as well.
Yeah, I would love that. You are totally speaking to the well-empowered world for sure, right? One of the big things when I work with people in the area of weight mastery, one of the big things we talk about is ditching the broken all or nothing approach, that overindulgence or deprivation and stepping into a whole new future of authorship, of authoring one's middle ground. And I know that the insights you have to offer about the big T, little t trauma as it pertains to either one of those will be really, really useful for people listening today.
I love that you talk about that middle ground, because I talk about the gray area, not black or white, but how
Love
can
it.
we live in the gray? So that's awesome. But yeah, so let's talk about the overindulging and the emotional eating portion. So there are a few mechanisms that play into this. First off, biologically, our bodies want to feel satiated, right? You want to feel satiated. And so when we are emotionally uncomfortable, we may reach for that food to feel full, to feel whole, to feel those emotions that maybe we're missing out on, or to even avoid the emotions that may be feeling overwhelming. When we eat those foods, our brain lights up with dopamine. That's kind of that comfort emotion that we will feel. And so we see that a lot of people that go through trauma who maybe haven't, processed those emotions in our bodies, they're going to reach for that hyper palatable food. So the high salt, sugar, processed food, because those foods light up that dopamine the most. Then that becomes a habit and it gives us comfort. But ultimately can actually hurt us or create a life that we don't want. The other part of this, aside from the biological part, is the social part. There's so many times that in our society we connect over food, whether that's for, a celebration or a holiday. And so it gives us those memories of enjoying time with our loved ones. And so if we partake in overindulging or eating, it brings us back to those places. So again, creating that safety around us that we're not feeling right now. And
so
then
with that, Dr. Kurape, do you mean so in some sense, I hadn't thought about this before, that sometimes when people overindulge, call it alone at lunch on a Wednesday, that's almost a way to subconsciously bring back tie it to the joy experience of, Christmas at their grandma's growing up sort of a situation.
exactly. Or just as simple as, that day you can't get lunch with someone that you would want to talk to, and that day you're alone. And so you start feeling those things more, brings you back to, oh, usually I overindulge with someone else. So it brings that back.
Great. Got it. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah. And then the other side of it is, the deprivation that you brought up. So when you go through a trauma, it is, of course, something that is very out of your control. It's very scary. And so what we end up doing is trying to create control in our lives to make us feel safe. And so that could be with food. So that could look like, creating food rules, like I can only eat these types of foods, or I can't eat these types of foods, or it can just look like in general restriction of eating. And that is just a way for our minds and our bodies to create perceived control, right? That's not control over our lives. We are kind of targeting it into the food, but it makes us feel safe. And that's why people do it. So in both of these ways, the overindulging and then also the deprivation, it becomes a maladaptive coping skill, but ultimately it is for comfort and for safety.
Right. Yeah. And I love that you say that, right? Because it's interesting, like when I talk to people, and I know you have the same experience too, right? When people can kind of trace back their behavior to when it started, or almost like when it emerged. Maybe it's around like a voice they're having, like a screw it kind of conversation, or whatever it might be. Fundamentally speaking, when they're able to trace it back, they really are able to see that it was born of really good intentions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think seeing it that way as well helps us to not be so critical of ourselves and not to judge ourselves. We really should be approaching these situations with compassion and love and understanding that what we went through was really difficult. And so we can't, force ourselves into good habits. We have to love ourselves into those habits.
So well said. So well said. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In that, loving ourselves into good habits, it's a journey, right? It's like, it doesn't
Absolutely.
happen overnight. And if it were easy, then the entire diet industry would be gone. right?
Mhm.
That whole approach clearly, I don't think anyone who's listening has any, belief otherwise, right? It's just a totally broken approach. It's not, it's not dealing with reality. It's not dealing with the totality of who people are and why they're struggling with what they're struggling with.
Yeah, dieting definitely does not let you live in that gray, right? It is that black or white. It's creating those rules. And so it's taking you away from who we are day to day, which changes all the time. We can't be stuck on either end.
Yeah. I also really like that you spoke to different environments, right? Because,
Mhm.
to me, it is a journey. The old adage of it takes 30 days to master a habit, it's like laughable, especially
Mhm.
in this area of nutrition, because how we're being with ourselves, if approaching this ourselves with love and compassion is we might find it easier on a Wednesday after we had a great night's sleep the night before versus a Sunday with, 4 hours of sleep the night before and a whole load of, external stressors on our plate, so to speak. Right. So knowing that, to be in the journey of self love and expressing self care as self love in your self care and how you're nourishing and caring for yourself and being gentle with yourself in your journey, right? It really, I mean, I feel like I tell people it's like, okay, a year is like one lap,
Mhm.
right? I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
Absolutely. And I think, when I work with my clients, I want to help their long-term health. Like, yes, we want to get to the root of the problem that's happening right now. And we want to make you feel comfortable and help you even see some strides that you're taking now. But really, the game is long-term. And so, how do we create habits or create a practice even of that practice that's going to take you all of those years. And I think it's so important, I'll say this time and time again, to meet yourself where you are, because like
mm,
you said, day to day, that's going to change. If you had less sleep, if you were just in a stressful environment, you're going to maybe have a tougher day that day. And that's where you bring in your compassion, you bring in that gentleness to yourself. Maybe you have more self-care practices that day versus a day where you sleep more. Maybe you had those really loving, great connections the day before. Maybe that's the day you push yourself in a workout or you push yourself to do that hard thing that you've been wanting to do. But each day is not going to look the same. And that's important to remember.
love it, right? Like dealing with reality, right?
Mhm. It is,
Yeah.
yeah. In the simplest form, it is.
Totally. That's great. All right. So next question here is, so for someone who's committed to authoring anew their relationship with their body, food, and themselves, is there a place you recommend they start or a question they might contemplate or reflect on?
Great question. I think with any new endeavor that you're going to cross, you have to understand your why, right? Why are you planning to take this journey? And I'm assuming if you are planning to take this journey, this is not the first time you're thinking about it, right? This has come up time and time again. Maybe you've already tried this a few times. Maybe you're already on the journey and you're just recommitting to the intention. But really understanding your why is what's going to take you through the journey. Like you said, not just that year, but all of those years and creating more of a cemented reality for you. When things get
Mhm.
tough, you can always come back to your why and understand, what's really happening here? Why am I pushing myself? And I think a great tool or a great exercise to do. I love visualization. I love to be able to imagine, like, where will I be in a year? Where will I be in 5 years, 10 years, whatever that is. So I really recommend that people create that visualization for themselves. You can close your eyes. If that doesn't feel safe, you can journal about it and really feel into yourself, like, what does it feel like to have this new relationship with myself or this new relationship with food? How am I walking? How am I talking? What does my body feel like? How do I carry myself? And I know personally, when I do this, I feel lighter, I feel confident, I feel strong, I'm proud of myself. And what's important to know is that if you can visualize this, it's already inside of you. You already have that in you. But by doing the visualization, it reminds you who your authentic self is. And then the journey is just bringing yourself back to that, taking away the noise and bringing you back to your core. So I think that's a really great tool where people can really see themselves where they want to be in a few years.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Well, it's, one of the things that I work with for everyone really who I work with at Well Empowered, we do an exercise I call creating your vision of vitality. And it is exactly what you're talking about, Dr. Kurapey. It's doing some time traveling to your intended future. So, okay, 5 years from now, tell me the first person present tense story of you walking around with your health as you desire and intend, they occur, right? So telling that story. And then I do actually also have people look at, okay, what would the spiral down 5-year future look like? Not because we want to stay there, but just because there is something useful in seeing like, okay, that would be a whole world of, pardon my French, suck that, I just like, no way, right? Because it does seem in my experience that we all make change given by the carrot dangling and the stick on the back. Now, I'm always going to have people ground in that carrot dangling. Ultimately, one's vision of vitality is born of that carrot dangling, not the crummy stick on the back, right? But for a moment to really like confront, like, oh wow, yeah, no, that would not be okay. That just like, no way, that just would not be okay.
Yeah. And to also think about that middle ground of what if I don't take action right now? If you're not ready to take those steps, I think that's okay as well. But meeting yourself in that middle ground of, well, why am I not ready to take this? And what does it look like in the next year if I don't take any action? And am I okay with that? Or do I want to take action and maybe those are smaller steps than I expect, but that's okay. There's still steps. So I think seeing all three of those perspectives helps you kind of move the needle a little bit.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. What was it? Someone who I work with, she gave me a great quote. Speed doesn't matter. Forward is forward. I was like, oh, that's good. I like that.
Absolutely. And as we're talking about the long game, once you look at how far you come, even with just those small steps, you're going to be so proud of yourself versus, not taking any action and sitting in, stillness. Years can go by, nothing can happen versus you can project yourself so far just by those little steps.
Definitely. It's like compounding interest, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So moving on to our third question here. If there was one tool you could magically give every person far and wide that would support their mental health, what would that tool be?
This is a good one. I think for me, something I practice, something I teach my clients is presence, the tool of being present in the moment. And it's so important because that's what's going to be able to give you that compassion for yourself and understand what you need that day. So this ability to check in with yourself, check in with your body, your mind, really acknowledge where you are today. Like I said, meet yourself where you are. And that's done without judgment and with a whole lot of compassion every day.
Yeah.
And so I really recommend people start developing this practice. I usually recommend, let's say 5 minutes a day where you can sit, you can take a few deep breaths, maybe your hand on your chest or your belly, on your shoulders, wherever you feel that tension, and really check in with how that feels. Is your chest constricted? Is your mind, does it have a lot of chatter, or do you feel more relaxed today? But cueing into those body cues and those mind cues is really going to help you understand where you are. Now, I know we're really busy. Everyone's running around doing a lot of stuff. So if you don't have the 5 minutes, that's okay. Take the 20 seconds, 30 seconds, put your hand on your chest, take a deep breath in, and you can come back to this multiple times throughout the day so that you can reorient yourself and move from a place of where you are follow your values and your goals. And ultimately, that's going to propel you to that fulfillment that we all want.
Yeah, yeah. I can definitely relate to that whole, even 20 seconds can be so profoundly shifting in a way that's hard to, it just doesn't, it's almost like it doesn't even make sense, but it doesn't matter. It just is, right? It is that profoundly shifting, right? It's like sometimes I'll find, okay, one sun salutation. Oh, I feel like it's just a whole new world, right? It's just a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah, and it goes back to, some of those rules that we may create with ourselves. So whether that's, okay, I can eat this or I can't eat that, or I have to do a 30-minute workout for it to count. It's not true, right? You can have these micro moments in your day that really shift your energy, really shift your perspective and bring you back to yourself. And all it takes is just a moment. So when we're busy, realizing that's okay and just creating those moments. And when we have more time, maybe delving into those practices more. But again, it's going to shift day to day.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm curious for you, Dr. Kurape, are there a few things that you personally have found? And of course, this is all, individual people are, we want you to author your own way of grounding and being present. But are there ways that you yourself really find useful for your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me tell you, it's been a journey, right? It's all about learning what works and doesn't work and readjusting. And I think right now, what I'm grounding into is meditation and specifically a breath work practice. I find that when I'm doing the breath work, it's actually releasing so much stagnant energy. And then afterwards, I'm able to sit in those 5-10 minutes of silence without, you know, arguing with my mind of pushing those thoughts away. It actually moves those thoughts through and then I can sit there. So I think breath work and meditation, exercise for me is a huge one. Again, that looks different every day. Today I went for a 10-minute run because that's all I had time for, but I'm glad that I did it. And maybe another day I do, a 30-minute yoga class or whatever that is. And then the third thing I think I would say is connection. That is huge. I think if we can continue to connect with those people that we love, create those relationships, that's going to make us feel fulfilled. And then we're going to be less likely to overindulge in whether that's food or a different area in our life. We're going to be fulfilled by those connections. So those are my three right now that I'm grounding into.
Love that. Yeah. That nourishment we get from being with people who love us and who we love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bringing us back to the issue with, food and how that's dealt with, after trauma, what we're trying to do is just to nourish ourselves, right? So
Mhm.
how can we create new practices in our day that nourish us just as much or even more that are actually healthy habits that will take us long term to who we want to be?
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. And I can say, just speaking to my own personal journey and evolution over time, right? For me, when it came to weight, right? Like I drew a line in the sand and it was about 2004, right? I like to call it the weight loss roller coaster for a long time. And it really was a journey. And all of this, like you said so beautifully, it is a journey, not was, it is, right? But in this area of life, I feel this is, I feel I live very aligned with my intention for my health and my vitality, right? And I do it out of love, and that was a journey to arrive where I am, right? But one of the things that I will say to your point that I found so useful was for me, movement is also always has been soul food, and movement has also been a form of meditation, right? So if I could, I found way over time that I could be with myself in a way when I was moving that really translated beautifully to being present with myself in times where there was more internal chatter, and it allowed me, being able to tap into myself and my why, and then be in that inquiry of, okay, well, what serves me right now? Just what serves me right now? No rules, no right, no wrong, just what serves me. But having some kind of practice that gives you a home base that you can access on any day, but especially when life gets busy.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that sometimes when people start on this journey of figuring out what that feels like for them, it can be scary. A lot of times we listen to those outside noises of, well, this is right for me, or, if you do this, it'll work. And just realizing it is a journey, it is a practice. You'll try things that don't sit right for you, but maybe sit right for other people. And again, coming back to that non-judgmental compassion that you have for yourself, that eventually you will find the things that fulfill you and that bring you presence.
Yeah, that's great. Really great. And then, to throw a question at your way, this is a little bit of a shift, but I think it's one that's, we won't go all the way into it, but just kind of touch that at a high level. Do you have any thoughts, Dr. Kurapey, about social media and, how it's impacting people, or, ways that people might cultivate a way of using it that works for them? I know that that's kind of vague, but just any thoughts on the whole world of social media?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've talked about, the black and white thinking, and, there's the good and the bad of everything, right? So social media, I think, can be a really great tool. I mean, now there are so many accounts on there that provide education, that, teach you things, show you different practices that are motivating, inspirational. And so finding those accounts that fulfill you and following those, I think, can be really helpful,
Mhm.
partnered with boundaries, because I think too much of anything can be a bad thing. And so if you can partner that with boundaries, setting up a time for yourself of how much you can look at those things, which accounts you follow, that would be helpful. I think the other, thing I recommend is in the morning, staying off of social media. In the morning when you wake up, it's your time to start anew, to really feel where you are that day. And if we put in that external noise too quick, we lose who we are that day. So I
Mm,
always recommend creating some kind of a practice where you feel into what's going on for you that day. And then later you can check the social media, but you don't want to start with those external cues too quick.
yeah, that's great. That's really great. Yeah. And I love, to your point, the bookends of the day. It's like
Mm-hmm.
starting connected to ourselves. And then, we go about our day and cultivate an elevated ability to stay connected, but, we're in our day doing our thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
really at the end of the day, reflecting on, hey, maybe we're reflecting on our wins. What am I really proud of myself for? Whether it's as simple as like, I took that box to UPS that's been sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
or, I ate an apple for a snack instead of Cheetos, like whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's really nothing too small that is, like anything that you see that's worthy of acknowledgement could go on that list. Like, for an example, right? Mm.
Absolutely. I love that. And something that I practice with my clients as well, like a gratitude list at the end of the day, no matter how big or small, it really cues our mind into that love that we have for ourselves, seeing our accomplishments and ending the day on a positive note. So then we can begin the next day with that same, positive energy. And you might even read that list the next morning to remind you, oh, hey, I did all those things yesterday. Let's see what I can cultivate today.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kurapey, for being here. And for those who would like to learn more about you and your practice, where can they find you?
The best place to find me is at my website. So that'll be modernintegrativepsych.com, PSYCH. And you can message me through there. There's some information on how, if you want to see me one-on-one, can read about it there as well. So that would probably be the best way to contact me.
Fabulous. Excellent. Well, I know our listeners are going to be just oozing with gratitude to you for all of the great knowledge and wisdom you've shared. And it's been such a treat to be here with you.
Thank you
And
for
for those
having
of
me.
you, oh yeah. And, for those of you who are listening, please do share this with loved ones. If you know others who you feel like would benefit from this conversation, it's our joy to be a part of your journey and anyone else's journey who you believe would benefit. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.